dutifully standing behind their shared bench desks dressed in school uniforms protected with blue aprons emblazoned with the school's coat of arms, belonged to her pupils. The other 20 or so older faces belonged to the children's parents, and it was this more mature audience who huddled at the rear of the cookery classroom with their backs to the large ornate windows offering sweeping views of the sea, which made Millie feel so uneasy. Not every child had a parent present at the back of the classroom, waiting to heap praise upon their offspring when he or she displayed their burgeoning culinary skills. 11 of the children had at least one of their parents standing behind them. Not the thin boy with the deep brown eyes and straw-like hair, though. He'd repeatedly glanced nervously at the clock when his mother had failed to arrive at the appropriate time, and had nobody present to witness his cooking skills being put into action in a classroom environment. Aware that Norman, the quiet and unassuming young werewolf, came from a tumultuous home, Millie had felt a heart-wrenching sympathy for him when his mother had failed to arrive. Nonetheless, Norman remained as eager as the other pupils to display his skills to the waiting adults, a resilience demonstrated by the young man which Millie considered highly admirable. Peeling her eyes from Norman, Millie turned her nervous gaze back to the parents. The fact that cookery lessons had been taken off the school curriculum 30 years previously following a fatal accident involving magic, a teacher who had developed witch dementia, and an oven, had made Millie realize just how much trust the parents were putting in her. She was, after all, responsible for their children's safety in a magical school, and more to the point, in the exact room in which a person had perished the last time cookery lessons had been on the curriculum. Millie was not only charged with teaching the youngsters how to bake a cake or roast potatoes, she was also entrusted with ensuring that none of the children was, through an accident of magic, turned into a soufflé mix and baked to death in an oven. The fact that it had been the teacher, and not a pupil who had met her untimely demise at gas mark 7 for 11 minutes, or so the story went, did make Millie wonder if it was her own or the children's safety she should be most concerned with. She knew she was at no risk really. The facts about the case of the so-called soufflé death, which Millie had managed to glean from the few people who could barely remember it, all pointed to the fact that the teacher in question had been suffering from witch dementia and shouldn't really have been teaching at all, especially in such a potentially hazardous environment as a room full of ovens, children, and sharp blades. The exact circumstances which saw her being transferred to a hot oven after accidentally turning herself into the soufflé mix were not entirely clear, but with a busy classroom full of children, each making their own soufflé, understandable at least. Millie refocused on the small crowd at the rear of the room and licked her lips. She smiled at the woman with the long nose who seemed to be waiting for her to say something. In fact, everybody seemed to be waiting for her to speak. What had she got herself into? Speaking to a group of children was one thing, but speaking to the parents was another. It was equivalent to public speaking, for heaven's sake. Not something she relished. Who'd have thought that she, Millie Thorn, would ever have become a teacher? In her defense, when she'd agreed to take the job of part-time cookery teacher in Spellbinder Hall, revitalizing the classroom with new ovens and equipment in the process, she hadn't fully realized that she'd be agreeing to shoulder all the responsibilities of a real teacher. She'd envisioned herself teaching non-judgmental young teens how to cook, but she had not envisaged herself being involved in a school open day presentation of the cookery skills the youngsters had acquired under her tutelage. The unpleasant sensation of being under the microscope, gazed through by the parents, was not one which Millie much liked, and she licked her dry lips again as she gazed once more at her waiting audience. Realizing with growing anxiety that a few of the adults appeared to be visibly bored, Millie smiled at one of the parents, who, presumably concerned by the blank look which Millie imagined was pasted on her face, looked like she wanted to hug her child's cookery teacher. A pity hug was not